The stars had always spoken to Maya Chen, even before she knew what they were saying. At 7 years old, she sat on the roof of her parents' small apartment in New Chicago, her eyes closed, her mind reaching out into the vast darkness above. She could feel them out there, the distant fires burning across impossible distances, and sometimes, when she concentrated very hard, she could feel something else, something alive. Her mother found her there most nights, wrapped in a thin blanket, her face turned upward like a flower seeking the sun. Dr. Lin Chen worried about her daughter, worried about the strange things Maya said, the way she knew things she should not know. When Maya told her that grandmother had died before the call came, Lin had simply held her daughter and cried. Maya was not like other children. The tests had shown that early, when she was only 3. The government doctors had come with their machines and their questions, and they had left with confused faces and thick files of data. They called her a psychic, one of the first true psychics ever documented, a mutation perhaps caused by the radiation storms that had swept Earth 30 years before. But Maya did not care about what she was called. She only cared about the voices she heard, the feelings that came to her in dreams. And lately, those dreams had been dark and full of fear. The aliens had arrived on a Tuesday morning, their ships appearing in the sky like metal mountains. The whole world had stopped to watch as the massive vessels descended through the clouds, blocking out the sun over every major city on Earth. Maya had felt them coming 3 days before, had woken screaming from nightmares filled with cold thoughts and cruel intentions. The Vorthak, they called themselves. They were tall and thin, with gray skin stretched tight over angular bones. Their eyes were black pools that reflected no light, and when they spoke, their voices buzzed like insects trapped in glass. They came as conquerors, though they used words like alliance and protection. Maya knew the truth. She could feel their hunger, their contempt for the small, soft creatures who called this blue world home. Emperor Zorath stood at the head of the Vorthak delegation, 7 feet of cold arrogance wrapped in robes of living metal. He looked upon humanity the way a farmer looks upon cattle, calculating their worth, their use, their eventual fate. His mind was a fortress of ice, but even ice has cracks, and Maya found them. She was 8 years old when she first touched the Emperor's mind. It happened during a broadcast, one of the many speeches he gave to explain the new order of things. Maya sat in her classroom, watching the screen along with all the other children, when suddenly she was somewhere else. She was inside him, swimming through thoughts as cold and sharp as broken glass. What she found there made her sick. The Vorthak had done this before, hundreds of times across hundreds of worlds. They came with their ships and their soldiers, and they took what they wanted: resources, labor, lives. The species that cooperated were allowed to survive as servants. The ones that resisted were examples, warnings to others, ash and memory. Earth was to be a servant world. Humanity would work the mines and factories, would build the weapons and ships for the Vorthak war machine. The strong would be bred for labor, the weak would be eliminated, and the children would be separated from their parents and raised to know nothing but obedience. This was the fate that Emperor Zorath had planned, and he had shared it with no one, not even his closest advisors. Maya pulled herself out of his mind with a gasp that made her teacher rush to her side. She spent the rest of the day in the nurse's office, pretending to have a headache, while inside she burned with a fire she did not understand. She was just a child, small and weak and unimportant. What could she do against an empire that stretched across 1,000 stars? But the voices would not let her forget. Night after night, they showed her what would come. She saw the camps being built, saw the families torn apart, saw the light fade from human eyes as hope became a memory. She saw her mother in chains, her father dead in a ditch, her world transformed into a prison without walls. And she saw herself, standing alone against an impossible darkness. The resistance formed slowly, carefully in the shadows beneath the Vorthak gaze. Humans had always been good at hiding, at waiting, at finding ways to survive. The old soldiers and the young dreamers found each other, sharing whispered plans and stolen weapons. They knew they could not win a direct fight. The Vorthak ships could turn cities to glass in seconds, but there were other ways to fight. Maya found them when she was 9, her mind reaching out across the city to touch another mind that burned with the same fire she felt. General Marcus Webb was 63 years old, a veteran of wars her parents could not remember, and he was planning something that would either save humanity or destroy it. Maya appeared in his dreams and told him she could help. At first he thought he was losing his mind. A little girl with dark eyes and a serious face, telling him secrets that no one could know. But Maya proved herself, again and again. She told him where the Vorthak patrols would be, when the supply ships would arrive, which human collaborators could be trusted and which were spies. She reached into enemy minds and pulled out their plans like threads from a sweater, unraveling their strategies before they could be used. The general began to believe. Others followed, drawn by the stories of the child who could see the future, who could speak without words, who held the key to humanity's salvation. They called her the Oracle, though she hated the name. She was just Maya, just a girl who wanted to save her mother, her father, her world. Emperor Zorath noticed when his plans began to fail. Small things at first: shipments delayed, patrols ambushed, information leaked to the wrong people. His advisors blamed human cleverness, the natural resistance of a conquered species. But Zorath was not a fool. He had ruled for 300 years, had broken 100 worlds beneath his heel. Something else was happening, something that made no sense. He ordered his investigators to find the source of the resistance. They searched for months, questioning, torturing, killing. They found cells and destroyed them, found leaders and made examples of them. But the resistance continued, always one step ahead, always knowing what the Vorthak would do before they did it. Zorath began to feel something he had not felt in centuries: fear. Maya turned 10 in hiding, surrounded by soldiers and scientists who treated her like a weapon and a miracle. She missed her parents, missed her school, missed the simple life she had lived before the ships came. But she could not go back. The Vorthak were hunting her now, though they did not know her face or her name. They knew only that somewhere on this stubborn planet there was a mind that could touch theirs, could see through their defenses, could threaten everything they had built. The war had begun, though most of Earth did not know it yet. In the darkness, in the silence, a child and an empire circled each other, waiting for the moment when one would strike and the other would fall. Maya did not know if she could win. She only knew that she had to try. The stars still spoke to her, and now she understood what they were saying. They were calling her to something greater than herself, something that would reshape the galaxy and everything in it. She was afraid, more afraid than she had ever been. But she was also ready. Humanity had always fought against impossible odds. It was in their blood, in their bones, in the stubborn fire that burned in their hearts. And now, that fire had found its champion, a small girl with dark eyes and a mind that could touch the stars. The Vorthak had conquered 100 worlds, but they had never faced anything like Maya Chen. The battle for Earth was about to begin. The underground base stretched beneath the ruins of old Chicago, tunnels carved through rock and concrete, lit by stolen power and desperate hope. Maya walked through corridors filled with soldiers who stood straighter when she passed, scientists who whispered her name like a prayer. She was 11 now, tall for her age, with her mother's dark hair and her father's stubborn jaw. But her eyes were her own, deep and strange and full of things no child should know. General Webb waited for her in the command center, surrounded by screens showing satellite feeds and troop movements. The Vorthak had tightened their grip on Earth in the past year, building towers in every city that broadcast signals of submission into human minds. Most people walked through their days in a fog, working and eating and sleeping without question. The resistance called them the sleepers, and every day there were more of them. Maya could feel the towers even from underground, a constant pressure against her mind like a headache that never stopped. The signals did not work on her, but they made her psychic abilities harder to use. She had to push through static and noise to reach the minds she needed to touch. General Webb showed her the latest reports. 3 resistant cells had been discovered and destroyed in the past week. The Vorthak were getting better at finding them, using technology that could detect the chemical signatures of people who were not affected by the towers. Maya knew what this meant. The enemy was adapting, learning, hunting. But she had learned something too. In the past months, she had discovered that her powers were growing, changing in ways she did not understand. She could now touch dozens of minds at once, could see through the eyes of birds and animals, could sense the Vorthak ships in orbit like cold spots in the warmth of space. And she had learned something else, something that gave her hope for the first time in years. The Vorthak were not united. Emperor Zoreth ruled through fear, crushing any who challenged his authority. But beneath his iron control, factions fought for power and influence. Some wanted to strip Earth bare and move on. Others wanted to keep humanity as slaves forever. And a very few, wondered if there might be a better way. Maya had touched the mind of one of these doubters, a Vorthak named Koreth who served as a minor administrator in what had been Tokyo. His thoughts were different from the others, softer somehow, filled with questions that his people were not supposed to ask. She had not revealed herself to him, had only listened and learned. But she filed his name away, knowing that someday he might be useful. The resistance leaders gathered around a table covered in maps and plans. There were 12 of them now, representing cells across the globe. They had come in secret, risking their lives for this meeting because Maya had asked them to. She had seen something, a possibility, a chance that might never come again. Emperor Zoreth was coming to Earth. The announcement had been made 3 days ago. The Emperor would personally oversee the completion of the final tower, the one being built in the heart of the Vorthak capital on Earth, the city they had built where New York once stood. He would demonstrate his power, remind humanity of their place, and return to the stars. It was supposed to be a show of strength. Maya saw it as an opportunity. She explained her plan to the gathered leaders, her voice steady despite the fear that churned in her stomach. The Emperor would be vulnerable on the ground, away from his ships, surrounded by only his personal guard. If they could get close enough, if Maya could touch his mind directly, she might be able to do something that would change everything. The leaders argued. It was too dangerous, too uncertain, too likely to fail. Even if Maya succeeded, the Vorthak fleet would simply destroy Earth in revenge. They had done it before, turned rebellious worlds to ash as warnings to others. What good would killing the Emperor do if humanity died with him? Maya listened to their fears, understanding them, sharing them. But she had seen further than they had, touched minds they could not reach. She knew something that changed everything. The Vorthak were dying. 300 years ago, they had been a vigorous species, spreading across the galaxy with unstoppable force. But something had happened, something they kept hidden even from themselves. Their birth rates were falling, their lifespans shortening. Each generation was weaker than the last. In another 500 years, there would be no Vorthak left. Emperor Zoreth knew this. It was the secret that drove his conquests, his desperate hunger for resources and slaves. He believed that somewhere in the galaxy he would find a cure, a way to save his people, and he believed that humans might hold the key. Maya had learned this from his mind during a moment of weakness, a broadcast where his thoughts had slipped past his defenses. She had not understood it at first, had needed months to piece together what she had seen. But now she understood, and she knew what it meant. The Vorthak could not destroy Earth. They needed humanity, needed the strange mutations that radiation had created, needed the genetic diversity that might save their species. Earth was not a slave world to be used and discarded. It was a laboratory, a breeding ground, a last desperate hope. When Maya told the leaders this, silence fell over the room. They looked at each other with new eyes, seeing possibilities they had never imagined. If what Maya said was true, then humanity had leverage. They had something the Vorthak needed, something that could not be taken by force. General Webb spoke first, his voice rough with emotion. He asked Maya what she wanted to do, what she thought they should do. For a long moment she did not answer. She was just a child, 11 years old, carrying the weight of a world on her small shoulders. Who was she to decide the fate of humanity? But the voices in her head, the same voices that had spoken to her since she was small, told her what she already knew. This was why she had been born, why she had been given her gifts. Not to destroy the emperor, but to talk to him. Not to fight a war, but to end one. She told them her plan, the real plan, the one she had been building in her mind for months. She would get close to Emperor Zarath, not to kill him, but to show him the truth. To open his mind to possibilities he had never considered. To offer him a choice between the destruction of both their peoples and something new. The leaders thought she was mad. Some of them shouted, others laughed bitterly. How could a human child convince an alien tyrant who had ruled for 3 centuries? What words could possibly change a mind built on conquest and cruelty? Maya did not have words. She had something better. She had the power to share her own mind, to show another being what she saw and felt and knew. She could make the emperor understand humanity not as slaves or resources, but as people, as beings worthy of respect and partnership. And she could show him the future, the 2 futures that lay before them both. In one future, the Vorthak continued their path of conquest. They squeezed Earth dry, extracted every resource, and moved on to the next world. They found no cure for their decline, because the cure could not be found by force. They withered and died, their empire crumbling, their species becoming a memory whispered by the slaves they left behind. In the other future, humans and Vorthak learned to work together. The genetic diversity of Earth combined with Vorthak technology created solutions neither species could have found alone. The decline was reversed, new children were born, and a partnership was formed that changed the galaxy. It was not a perfect future, not a future without conflict or pain, but it was a future where both species survived. Maya had seen these futures in her dreams, had walked through them like a visitor in a strange land. She did not know which one would come true. That depended on choices that had not yet been made, words that had not yet been spoken. But she believed with all her heart that the second future was possible. The leaders debated through the night, arguing and questioning and slowly, reluctantly, coming to accept what Maya proposed. It was insane, suicidal, impossible. But it was also their only chance. The resistance was failing, the sleepers were multiplying, and time was running out. If Maya believed she could change the emperor's mind, then they had to let her try. When morning came, the decision was made. Maya would go to the ceremony in New York. She would get as close to the emperor as possible, and she would reach out to him, mind to mind, and show him the choice that lay before them all. General Webb offered to go with her, to lead a team that would protect her and give her the time she needed. Maya accepted, grateful for his presence, for the steady strength he had shown her over the years. He had become like a father to her, filling the space left by her own father, who had been taken by the Vorthak 2 years ago. She thought about her parents as she prepared for the mission. Her mother was still alive, somewhere in the work camps in what had been California. Her father had died in a cave-in, his body never recovered. Maya carried them with her always, their memories burning in her heart like stars that would never fade. Whatever happened in New York, she would do it for them. The day of the ceremony drew closer. Maya trained with the soldiers, learning to move quietly, to hide, to survive. She practiced her abilities, pushing through the static of the towers, reaching out to touch minds across the city. And she thought about what she would say to the emperor, what images she would share, what truths she would reveal. She was not afraid of dying. She had accepted that possibility long ago. What frightened her was failing, was watching humanity fall into darkness because she had not been strong enough or clever enough to save them. The weight of that fear pressed on her constantly, making it hard to sleep, hard to eat, hard to breathe. But she also felt something else, something stronger than fear. Hope. The stubborn, irrational hope that had kept humanity alive through ice ages and plagues, through wars and disasters, through the long night of occupation. They had survived because they refused to give up, refused to accept that tomorrow could not be better than today. Maya was the daughter of that hope, the child of a species that had looked up at the stars and dreamed of touching them. Whatever happened in New York, she would show the Emperor what humanity truly was. Not weak, not helpless, not meant to be slaves, but strong, resilient, beautiful in their determination to survive. The stars were watching and they were waiting. Soon, very soon, everything would change. The day of the ceremony dawned gray and cold, clouds hiding the sun as if the sky itself was holding its breath. Maya stood on a rooftop 3 blocks from the massive square where the final tower was being completed, its metal spire reaching toward the heavens like a finger pointing at God. She could feel the tower's power from here, a buzzing in her skull that made her teeth ache. General Webb crouched beside her, his weathered face tight with tension. Around them, scattered across the ruined buildings of old Manhattan, were 40 of the Resistance's best soldiers. They carried weapons that could barely scratch Vorthak armor, but their job was not to fight. Their job was to create chaos, to distract the guards, to give Maya the second she needed. The square below was filling with people. Humans in gray work clothes, shuffling into position with the blank faces of sleepers. Vorthak soldiers in their segmented armor, weapons humming at their hips. And in the center of it all, a raised platform where the Emperor would stand to complete the tower and demonstrate his dominion over Earth. Maya watched and waited, her mind reaching out carefully, touching the edges of the Vorthak consciousness without alerting them to her presence. She felt their confidence, their boredom, their contempt for the weak creatures gathered to witness their Emperor's glory. None of them suspected what was coming. An hour passed, too. The sun climbed higher behind the clouds, casting a pale light over the dead city. Finally, a stir passed through the crowd and Maya felt him. Emperor Zorath was arriving, his mind like a glacier sliding into the warmth of her awareness. He was exactly as she remembered, cold and sharp and immensely powerful. But there was something else there too, something she had not sensed before. Weariness. Age. The weight of 300 years pressing down on shoulders that were no longer as strong as they had once been. The Emperor stepped onto the platform, his robes of living metal flowing around him like liquid silver. He raised his arms and the crowd fell silent, humans and Vorthak alike bowing before his presence. When he spoke, his buzzing voice was amplified across the square, echoing off the empty buildings. He talked about the glory of the Vorthak Empire, about the honor he was bestowing upon humanity by allowing them to serve. He talked about the tower, about how its completion would bring full submission to Earth, how the last sparks of resistance would be extinguished forever. He talked about the future, a future where humanity would know its place and accept its role in the cosmic order. Maya listened not to his words but to the thoughts behind them. She heard his doubts, his fears, the questions he would never ask aloud. She felt his loneliness, the isolation of power, the burden of leading a dying species toward an uncertain future. And she knew with sudden clarity that she had been right. There was something in him that could be reached, some part that still remembered what it was like to hope. She gave the signal. Explosions bloomed across the square, carefully placed charges that created noise and smoke without killing anyone. The Vorthak soldiers scattered, turning toward the threats they had been trained to face. In the chaos, Maya moved. She ran through the crowd, dodging stumbling bodies and shouted commands, her eyes fixed on the platform. General Webb was beside her, his presence steady and reassuring. The soldiers were doing their job, drawing attention, creating confusion. She only needed seconds, just a few more seconds. A Vorthak guard spotted her, raised his weapon. General Webb threw himself in front of the blast, his body absorbing the energy that would have killed her. He fell without a sound, and Maya felt his mind wink out like a candle in the wind. Pain lanced through her, grief and rage and something else, something stronger. She kept running. She reached the platform just as the Emperor's personal guard closed around him. They were faster than the others, stronger, their minds honed to razor sharpness. But Maya was faster still. She slipped through a gap in their formation, ducked under a reaching arm, and threw herself at the Emperor. Her hand touched his chest, skin to metal, and she opened her mind. The connection was like nothing she had ever experienced. The Emperor's consciousness crashed into hers with the force of a tsunami, 300 years of memories and experiences flooding through her in an instant. She saw worlds burning, species enslaved, children crying out for parents they would never see again. She saw the first signs of the decline, the secret meetings where advisors whispered impossible truths, the desperate search for a cure that never came. And she showed him what she had seen. Her own memories, her fears, her hopes, the face of her mother, the sound of her father's laugh, the warmth of summer days that would never come again. The dreams she had dreamed, the futures she had walked through, the choice that lay before them both. The Emperor tried to push her out, his mind a fortress of ice and iron. But Maya was not attacking. She was offering. She opened herself completely, let him see everything she was, everything humanity was. The fear and the courage, the cruelty and the kindness, the capacity for destruction and the endless hunger for creation. She showed him humans at their worst and humans at their best, and she asked him to choose. Time stopped. The world fell away. There was only the connection between them, two minds touching across an impossible gulf, finding something neither had expected: understanding. Emperor Zoreth saw what he had refused to see for 300 years. That conquest was not strength but weakness, not survival but slow death. That the species he had crushed beneath his heel might have been allies, partners, friends. That the cure he sought was not in domination but in cooperation, not in taking but in giving. He saw the future Maya had shown him, the bright possibility of two species rising together, and he felt something stir in the cold depths of his heart. Hoping. The guards pulled Maya away, threw her to the ground, raised their weapons. But the Emperor stopped them with a gesture. He stood on the platform, his black eyes staring down at the small girl who had touched his mind, and for a long moment no one moved. Then he spoke, his voice different now, softer, almost wondering. He asked her name. She told him. He asked her what she wanted. She told him that too: peace, partnership, a chance for both their peoples to survive. The Vorthak soldiers waited, uncertain, their weapons still humming. The human sleepers stood frozen, their blank faces showing nothing. Maya looked up at the Emperor, the being who had conquered her world, killed her friends, enslaved her species. And she saw tears, actual tears, falling from those black alien eyes. What happened next would be debated by historians for centuries. Some said the Emperor had been planning to change course anyway, that Maya simply gave him an excuse. Others said her psychic abilities had fundamentally altered his brain, rewriting his thoughts against his will. But those who were there, who felt the shift in the air, knew the truth. Two beings had met across the gulf of species and hatred and war, and they had found common ground. Emperor Zoreth ordered his soldiers to stand down. He announced, to the shock of everyone watching, that the tower would not be completed. He spoke of a new beginning, a partnership between Vorthak and human, an alliance that would change the galaxy. His advisors protested, his generals raged, but the Emperor silenced them all. He had made his choice. The days that followed were chaos. Some Vorthak refused to accept the Emperor's decision, launching attacks on human populations that were quickly put down by loyal forces. Some humans refused to believe the war was over, continuing their resistance against an enemy that no longer wanted to fight. But slowly, painfully, the violence faded and something new began to grow. Maya stood at the center of it all, a bridge between two worlds. She translated meanings that words could not capture, smoothed conflicts before they could become crises, helped beings who had been enemies see each other as partners. It was exhausting work, draining her mind and body, but she never stopped. This was what she had been born for. This was her purpose. Her mother was freed from the work camps 3 weeks after the ceremony. Maya held her for hours, feeling the bones beneath her skin, the scars on her hands, the weariness in her eyes. But there was joy there too, fierce and unbreakable, the joy of a mother reunited with her child. They cried together, laughed together, and began the slow process of healing. Korath, the Vorthak administrator Maya had touched in Tokyo, became one of the first ambassadors of the new alliance. He worked with human scientists to study the genetic mutations that radiation had created, searching for the key that might save his species. Within a year, they had found promising leads. Within 5 years, the first healthy Vorthak children in generations were born. Emperor Zoreth stepped down from power 10 years after the ceremony, passing leadership to a council of Vorthak and humans working together. He lived another 50 years, spending his final days in a small house by the sea on Earth, watching the waves and talking to the human children who came to hear his stories. When he died, Maya was there, holding his hand, feeling his mind slip away into whatever came next. She was 70 years old by then, her dark hair gray, her face lined with age. She had lived to see the alliance spread across the galaxy, to see other species join the partnership, to see the beginning of a new era of cooperation and growth. Her powers had faded with time, as all things fade, but her legacy remained. The children of Earth went to the stars, not as slaves but as equals. They built cities on distant worlds, made friends with beings beyond imagination, carried the stubborn hope of humanity to the farthest reaches of the cosmos. And everywhere they went, they told the story of Maya Chen, the psychic child who had challenged alien tyrants and reshaped interstellar politics. It had started with a little girl on a rooftop, listening to the voices of the stars. It had grown into something she could never have imagined, a movement that changed everything. And though Maya herself was just a memory now, her name spoken in reverence by billions across 1,000 worlds, the truth of what she had done remained. Humanity had faced impossible odds and refused to surrender. They had reached out across the void, touched minds that seemed utterly alien, and found common ground. They had proven that the universe was not a place of endless war and conquest, but a tapestry of possibilities waiting to be woven together. The stars still spoke, and now there were many who could hear them. Children of all species, born with gifts they did not understand, learning to reach out and connect. They carried Maya's legacy forward, building bridges where others saw only walls, finding hope where others saw only despair. And somewhere in the quiet moments between the words, Maya's voice still echoed, reminding them that even the smallest being could change the course of history. That courage was not the absence of fear, but the determination to act despite it. That the future was not written in stone, but shaped by choices made in the present. Humanity had looked up at the stars and dreamed, and against all odds, against every obstacle and enemy, they had made those dreams come true. Not through conquest or violence, but through connection, understanding, and love. That was the true power of humanity. Not weapons or technology, not strength or cunning, but the endless capacity to hope, to reach out, to see in others what they might not see in themselves. It was the power that had saved Earth, transformed the Vorthak, and changed the galaxy forever. And it all began with a child who could hear the stars.